On today's Locked On Giants podcast, should head coach Brian Daboll take control of the play calling? I'll go over the pros and the cons and tell you what I think, amongst other things, coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for the New York Giants team page over on the Fan Nation Network. You can find the written work at si.com/NFL/Giants. And a special welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. You are appreciated. And if you watch on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click the little notification bell so that you're notified every time I post a new video. And if you wouldn't mind, like the video. It all helps us with getting the word out to other Giant fans who might not know about the Locked On Giants podcast. So welcome on in. On today's show, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to start off with a look at, should head coach Brian Daboll take over the play calling? I'm going to go over the pros and cons of both sides of the coin, tell you what I think, and why I think it may or may not make sense. So that'll be up first. And then for segment number 2, we're going to take a look at what I call spring sleepers. Who are several players that I'm looking at this spring with OTAs and the mandatory minicamp coming up? Who are the players that I'm looking for to really kind of have a big spring? So we'll talk about that. And then in segment 3, with the Giants media allowed in to see the first OTA on Thursday, which is actually the third OTA the team is holding, but it'll be the first the media is allowed in, I'm going to talk about what I'm going to be looking for. And of course, on Friday's show, I will come back and I will give you a full rundown of all my observations. I'll empty out my notebook for you, and we'll just send you off into the weekend, the long Memorial Day weekend, with some hardcore Giant news. So that is today's agenda. Again, welcome on in. Let's get started. We're going to kick things off with, should head coach Brian Daboll call the plays? Now, my everydayers and my readers probably know that in the past, I have been kind of against coaches calling plays, head coaches calling plays. And the reason for that is I feel that if a coach isn't organized, he's going to miss things. He's not, if he's focused on one side of the ball, he's going to miss stuff. And I hearken back to when Ben McAdoo was here and he insisted on calling the plays. And I think back to, things that were missed, opportunities to call challenges, to call timeouts, clock management, all that stuff, decisions that might have needed to be made on defense and on special teams, all of which kind of fell by the wayside because McAdoo had his face in that big menu card that he used to call plays. So that kind of put me off a little bit to the concept of head coaches calling plays. Now, obviously, I'm aware that there are coaches out there that do it. Andy Reid does it down in Kansas City. I believe Sean McVay does it. I think Kyle Shanahan does it. So it can work for teams. All right. So with the Giants, does it make sense now for Brian Daboll, who is now entering his 3rd year as head coach, to call plays? I think it does, and I think he will call the plays. And here's why I say that. Number one, we all know this is a big year for the Giants. This is a year that they have got to get things back on track. All right. I think the first 2 years Daboll was head coach of this team, it was more or less him getting his feet wet, getting acclimated to the expanded responsibilities. And right from the moment that Mike Kafka, the current offensive coordinator, received the promotion to assistant head coach, right then and there, that told me that there was a very, very real possibility that Brian Daboll was thinking of taking back control of the play call. But here's the other thing, and I've mentioned this earlier in the week. I think, with Daboll having developed the system that is in place, and he's going to say that everybody contributed, and I'm sure everybody did, contribute bits and pieces here and there and whatnot. But, let's face it, this Giants offense is primarily Daboll's concepts and his ideas. So if he's developed it, why not call the plays? Why not say, okay, look, I understand the system as well as anybody. Let me get in Daniel Jones's ear or Drew Lock's ear or Tommy DeVito's ear, and let me make sure that this offense runs the way it's supposed to be. Now, this is not a knock on Mike Kafka. I want to make that very clear. But that's not to say that, if you have, say, 3rd and 11 from your own 40-yard line, that the call Kafka's going to make is the same call that Daboll's going to make. So sometimes when you have, the author of the playbook, so to speak, and he's not calling the plays, he's giving it to someone else to interpret, even if that somebody had a little, contribution into creating that playbook. Sometimes the concepts and the ideas are a lot different and not always successful. So I believe it does make sense at this point for Brian Daboll to call the plays, not just to help the quarterbacks and the offense get off the ground and become what they envision it to be. But look, let's face it, the Giants have got to show progress this year. They absolutely have to show progress. The offense, you can make an argument that the offense has kind of held this team back because it's just not been very good. It's been, ranked at or near the bottom. So look, get the offense headed in the right direction. Keep it so that, the defense, all they got to do is get the ball back, and then they can enjoy a nice long rest on the bench while the offense eats up the clock. And, that hopefully puts you on the right track towards winning games. So that's my argument for Daboll calling plays, and I do believe he's going to do that. And by the way, that is something I will keep an eye on during the OTA. I want to see who's actually calling the plays. Now, the argument against it is, like I said, you go back to the McAdoo era when he was calling plays, things get missed. But McAdoo, if I remember correctly, I don't know that he had an assistant head coach. And the operation on game day was always a little, disjointed to where things were missed. I think Daboll, in tightening up things on his staff, and again, being in year 3 as a head coach, I have reason to think and to be hopeful that any of those problems that might pop up won't be an issue where, oh my God, do we call a timeout here? Do we call for a challenge here? It hasn't been a problem yet. I think what Daboll has done is he's delegated some of that to the people who sit upstairs in the press box and watch the games. So that's been working well for him. I think, him as a play caller can work well here. He's got an experienced defensive coordinator in Shane Bowen, so it's not like he has to hold his hands. Michael Gabriel is the first-time special teams coordinator at the NFL level, but he has plenty of experience. No reason for Daboll to hold his hand. These are all reasons why I think the Giants are set up for Brian Daboll to call the plays, and why I think if he does call the plays, I'd like to see how the quarterbacks end up doing. Can he salvage Daniel Jones, get him back on track? Because look, Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback. At this point, whether we like it or not, that's how it's going to be. Drew Lock is here as the backup. Whether we like it or not, that's how it's going to be. Tommy DeVito and Nathan Rourke are going to battle for number 3. Whether we like it or not, that's how it's going to be. So why not give those guys the best opportunity to succeed? And Daboll calling the plays, I think, would do that, would give them the best opportunity to succeed. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, I've got some spring sleepers, guys that this spring I am looking for to have a productive showing in the OTAs and also in the mandatory minicamp that's coming up in June. I'll tell you who I have on my list right after this. Hey, Giant fans. So let me tell you about Yahoo Finance, our sponsor today. If you have trouble keeping up with multiple investment and retirement accounts, you need to check out Yahoo Finance. Yahoo Finance lets you consolidate multiple accounts into one hub. Plus, it gives you access to expert analysis to make informed decisions affecting investment opportunities. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Yahoo Finance offers all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401ks and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And again, Friday, Giants, we will have the OTA report, OTA number 3. I'll actually have that for you probably at some point on Thursday. The Giants, I think our day starts at, I want to say 9:30-ish, if I'm not mistaken. Practice will run into the afternoon. And then, of course, there's writing to be done. And then as soon as I can get home and get everything set up, I will sit down. I will record a podcast for you. We'll try and get that up for you as early as I can. Sometime around, I would say early evening would be my guess, depending on how long it takes me to get home and get everything set up. But that will be coming. So make sure you check that out. And that'll, of course, be our final show for this week. So again, thank you for your interest in the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, let's talk about spring sleepers. All right. Now, these are guys that I've identified that I'm interested to see how well they have come along, because I think they could potentially have a big role on this team, whether it be on the offensive side or the defensive side. So here are the names that I'm going to be looking at when I get in the building for the OTAs and for the eventual mandatory minicamp. Now, spoiler alert, there are no rookies on here. I don't consider rookies right now sleepers, unless you're talking an undrafted rookie to really, make waves. But here are the guys I'm looking at. All right, I'm going to start off with tight end Daniel Bellinger. All right, now I have said that I believe that Darren Waller is going to retire. If he does, that means that Bellinger is going to become tight end 1. All right, now last year Bellinger was kind of an afterthought for this team because, Waller came in and, Waller was the source of most of the targets, and it was Waller's game, and Bellinger was kind of an afterthought. But, you harken back to Bellinger's rookie season, and he was a pretty good pass catcher. Not as athletic as Waller when Waller is healthy, but still effective, got the job done, and reliable. So I'd like to see the Giants maybe get back to using him more in the passing game. Now, this we won't be able to tell until the pads go on, but I thought last year Waller's blocking went a little backwards. There might have been an injury in there that we don't know about, but that being said, I want to see moving forward how he blocks, because, I think how he ends up blocking could determine who they keep as the third tight end. Right. We know tight end number 2 is going to be Theo Johnson, the 4th round pick, who, depending on how, Waller and Theo Johnson block, that's going to depend on whether they go with like a Lawrence Cager, or if they go with a Chris Manhertz or a Jack Stoll or maybe somebody else. All right. So that's number 1. Number 2, I want to see Dane Belton, safety. Now, everybody probably thinks that Tyler Nubin, the 2nd round draft pick, is automatically going to step in and play the starting role next to Jason Pinnock, the role that was vacated by Xavier McKinney. That is probably going to be what happens. But, the coaches will, of course, say that they got to compete. I still say, though, that if that does happen, there will still be a big enough role on this defense for Belton who last year when he had to step in, when Pinnock was injured and Belton had to step into the starting lineup, Belton didn't look that bad. The ball found him. He was, he showed good instincts. The concern with Belton is, can he hold up to the physical nature of the game? I think that, is something we saw his rookie season and something that kind of popped up also last year. That said, I'm curious to see how they deploy Belton. If they, rotate him in with Newbin, or do they, go to a big nickel package, or however they're going to use it. All right, another guy that I think is a sleeper. Offensive lineman Joshua Ezeudu, entering year 3. Now, going back to the pictures that were posted on Giants.com of the first OTA, you saw Joshua Ezeudu working with the first team offensive line at left tackle, the position that Ezeudu tried to play last year, but just wasn't ready to play. So it's interesting. There's, Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, came in with the reputation of liking to see his guys cross train unless they're like top 5 at their position. I don't believe Andrew Thomas was at the Monday OTA, which is not a big deal. Some guys, they missed the first OTA. It's not the end of the world. But, it was good to see Joshua Ezeudu, who ended last season with the toe injury, get an opportunity to work with the first team offensive line. That's a kid they really need to develop. I got a question for a mailbag that I'm doing over on the Giants team page for SI's Fan Nation about which of the young offensive linemen really need to step up and develop. All of them is my answer. And especially Joshua Ezeudu, who can give them guard and tackle versatility there. So I'd like to see what he does coming off of the injury. All right, another guy that I'm going to be looking for is Jordan Riley, who is probably going to be the backup to Dexter Lawrence, but in a very important role all the same. Jordan Riley flashed, didn't look like he was out of place last year, wasn't polished as, what you would expect for any rookie to be at that stage. But look, Dexter Lawrence, if you need to give him a rest, can Jordan Riley go in there, hold down the fort, and there not be as much of a drop off? So I'm looking to see how he does. That we might have to wait though until the pads go on, as would be the same thing with Ezeudu, because offensive linemen, defensive linemen, they need to put the pads on, they need to hit. But still, you can look at things like, what technique are they being taught? How are they executing in the individual position drills and that sort of thing? So I'm going to see if I can spot that depending on, how close the Giants let us get to the various drills that are going on in the field. Okay. I also have Ryder Anderson, defensive lineman, as a potential sleeper. Ryder Anderson is a guy who, when we talk about who's going to play defensive end in the 3-4 defensive scheme, he's a possibility. So somebody to certainly keep an eye on. He's a guy that last year did not get any snaps. The year before, he made the team as an undrafted free agent. So they obviously saw something in him. So let's see, again, in drills, we won't be able to see it until we get to the summer and the pads go on. But how is he coming along with his footwork, with his explosiveness, all that good stuff? Usually the defensive line drills are usually in front of the media. So I usually get a pretty good look at that. So hopefully that'll be the case. But again, it depends on where the Giants put us to watch the practice. One other guy I'm going to mention, and he's sort of a forgotten guy, and that is Azeez Ojulari. Now, obviously, with the arrival of Brian Burns, you figure, okay, it's going to be Kayvon Thibodeau, it's going to be Brian Burns as your outside linebackers, and then Dexter Lawrence, and there's your pass rushing trio. I still think, though, Azeez Ojulari, if he can stay healthy, big if, is going to be a part of that pass rushing mix. Sort of like the old 4 Aces package. I don't know if y'all remember that, but back when Steve Spagnuolo was here, I think it was in 2007, he used to have a pass rushing package that he called the 4 Aces. And it was basically 4 defensive ends that he managed to get on the field by moving some of them inside the defensive tackle, and they would come after the quarterback, and boy, were they disruptive. It was a really, really neat package. And then years later, they came up with a NASCAR package, which was their speed rush package, because they had Jason Pierre-Paul, I think they had OCU Manura at the time, all speed rushers. And that was also a pretty cool package. So with Azeez Ojulari, if he's healthy, I'm thinking maybe they could come up with a package that's very similar to what they ran with the NASCAR group. So something to also keep an eye on for me at any rate. It's in my notebooks to keep an eye on. Okay, so since we've been talking about OTAs, the next topic we're going to talk about, next segment, is what else do I want to see in OTA number 3? I'll tell you right after this. Hey, Giant fans. So, with the dead period coming up in the NFL calendar, I'm really looking forward to catching some shows and concerts in my local area. And no matter what I end up choosing, I never have to worry about being shut out thanks to Game Time. With Game Time, there are always great seats available at competitive prices. Game Time offers last minute deals that can save you even more, and they take away the guesswork that comes with the buying experience. Game Time offers clear seat views and event cancellation protection. Plus, if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, the Giants have OTA number 3 on Thursday. So those of you who are watching this show Thursday morning, the OTA is going on right now. So you want to make sure you're following me on X, formerly known as Twitter. And if you're watching the video, you can see my handle is below. But if you're listening on audio, you can follow me at Patricia_Traina, Traina. Or if you prefer to watch videos, clips from the practices and from the media sessions, go to my Instagram account. It's a verified Instagram account, and that is at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA, and check that out throughout the day. I'll be posting clips. I'll be, pictures, whatever I'm allowed to post. I will try and get that out so that you guys can enjoy that and get a little taste of what's going on with the OTAs. So anyway, what else am I going to be looking for? I mentioned my sleepers, my spring sleepers in the last segment. Here's a few things that I'm going to be looking for from a broader perspective in OTA number 3. Now, before I go into this list real quick, the Giants have been, in-house media has been putting out, observations, which are appreciated. But, as with anything, if you want to see for yourself kind of what's going on. So one of the things I definitely want to see is how Daniel Jones is moving around. How is he throwing the ball? Now, I have heard many times from, not just on the record, but off the record that Daniel Jones is making incredible progress in his return from the torn ACL, that he is moving around beautifully without any kind of, hint of a limp, without any apparent discomfort. So I want to take a look at how he is throwing the ball. I want to take a look at if he is, attempts to run the ball. How does he look? Now, I don't know that he's necessarily participating in 11-on-11s, but that is something that I will certainly be keeping an eye on as part of the practices. I'll keep that in my notes. I also want to take a look at the offensive line instruction. Now, on Giants.com, they made note of, how there was a lot of teaching going on. I'd like to see exactly what type of teaching. How does Carmen Brasillo, the new offensive line coach, approach teaching these guys? And if we get an opportunity, to request individual players, I might just see if I can get an offensive lineman or two and see, what Brasillo has been teaching them. What is his philosophy? Kind of get an idea for, what to expect. Now, the defensive coaches, just a quick note, the defensive coaches are going to be available to the media on Thursday. And then the following week, we get the offensive coaches. So we won't get to actually talk to Brasillo and the rest of the offensive position coaches until next Thursday, but just something else to keep in mind. Plenty to ask of the defensive assistant coaches, by the way. All right, so I want to see, the cross-training on the offensive line and how Brasillo approaches, the different drills, teaching and whatnot. Hopefully the offensive line and defensive line individual groups will be close enough to the media so we can see all that. I want to see what kind of defensive alignment they are running. All right. Dexter Lawrence is obviously going to be the centerpiece if he's there. So who's going to be next to him? Is it going to be Jordan Phillips? Is it going to be Ryder Anderson? Is it going to be somebody else? So we'll take a look at that. I want to see the pass rush plan. They obviously, again, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, the primary pass rushers, but how many, do they do anything fancy? I don't think that's what Shane Bowen is looking to do, but does he have a trick or two in his book that maybe he's going to take a look at and try out? Because remember, the springtime is usually a time to experiment, get to know your personnel and get to know what you like and what you don't like, what works and what probably won't work. So that's something else I want to take a look at. And then this is probably an understatement, but it's important given how inconsistent the group was last year. But I'd like to see how maybe special teams might be taking shape. I think we know that Gunnar Olszewski is going to be the punt returner. Who's going to be the kickoff returner? Because now with that new kickoff rule, how is that going to be coached? Who's going to be called on to, handle those duties? Are the gunners on the punt team, from last year, Darnay Holmes and Nick McLeod, are they going to be the gunners again this year? No reason why they shouldn't, but, maybe there's somebody better that steps in. So, it's all preliminary. I get it. And it's all subject to change as training camp goes on and whatnot. But you want to get an idea, a feel, so that, I know when I sit down and I write about it and when I do future shows about it, I have a little bit more of a feel to where I can put some, what I've seen into what I'm telling you guys. So those are some of the things I want to take a look at, the rookie mini camp podcast that I did for you guys. I talked about the differences in some of the drills and some of the ways that the practice was structured. That was for the rookies. Now, has it changed much for the veterans? So that's something else I'll be taking a look at. The running back committee, obviously, Devin Singletary will probably be the main guy, but how will that order stack up? Drew Lock, how comfortable does he look at this point? He's been here for a couple months now. How is he learning the offense? So there's a whole lot of stuff to keep an eye on. I don't know that I'll get to everything because, again, it depends on where the Giants let us stand and where the players actually practice. If we're outside, then sometimes they take the offensive line and the defensive line in the back of the building where we can't see it. If they don't, if they're in the field house, maybe we'll get to see it a little bit more. That being said, I'll bring you whatever I can, as always. So make sure you look for that show. Again, I will try and get that out to you just as soon as humanly possible. Once I get home, once I get everything reconnected in my little home studio here, and I organize my notes for you. So that is going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending time with us. Be sure to keep it here again tomorrow, as I will be back with the aforementioned promised OTA show. So until then, Giant fans, have a good one, and I will see you tomorrow.